A 6-year-old girl takes a piece of bread to the backyard every night. One day, her mother follows her and discovers something unbelievable. 6-year-old Emily Carter had a way of disappearing into her own little world. While her older brother, Sam, spent his evenings playing video games, and her baby sister cried for attention, Emily would slip outside to the backyard, finding solace in its quiet corners. The Carters' backyard was modest, a patch of grass bordered by an old wooden fence and a few overgrown bushes. Beyond the fence stretched farmland that Megan, Emily's mother, always warned her children not to wander into. But Emily never seemed interested in going that far. She preferred to linger near the bushes, crouching low and staring at something Megan could never quite see. At first, Megan didn't think much of it. Emily was a curious child, and the backyard was her playground. But over the past week, a pattern had emerged. Every evening, just after dinner, Emily would ask for a slice of bread. "It's for the birds," she'd say, her voice soft and earnest. Megan had smiled at the explanation. Her daughter's love for animals was endearing, and scattering breadcrumbs for sparrows seemed harmless enough. But then Megan began to notice other things. Emily wasn't just tossing crumbs onto the grass, she was slipping behind the bushes and staying there for longer stretches of time. And when Megan asked about it, Emily would quickly change the subject or mumble an excuse before retreating to her room. One night, Megan mentioned it to her husband, Tom, as they cleaned up the kitchen. "She's been taking bread out every night," Megan said, rinsing a plate. "And she's so secretive about it. Do you think she's feeding something?" Tom shrugged, drying his hands. "Maybe. She's 6, Megan. She probably thinks she found a magic bird or something." Megan frowned. "It's just strange. She won't let me go near the bushes. And she's been so quiet lately, even for her." Tom chuckled. "You're overthinking it. She's just a kid." Megan nodded, but the uneasy feeling lingered. The following evening, Megan decided to pay closer attention. From the kitchen window, she watched as Emily grabbed her usual slice of bread and slipped out the back door. Emily moved with a sense of purpose, her small figure illuminated briefly by the porch light before disappearing into the shadows near the bushes. Megan leaned closer to the window, straining to see what her daughter was doing. Emily crouched low, her back to the house, and stayed there for several minutes. She seemed to be talking, her hands moving in small, deliberate motions. But to what, or to whom, Megan couldn't tell. Max, their golden retriever, padded over to the glass door and let out a soft whine. Megan glanced down at him, surprised. Max was usually indifferent to Emily's backyard adventures, but now his ears were perked, his nose pressed against the glass as if he could sense something unusual. "Quiet, boy," Megan whispered, stroking his head. When Emily finally returned, Megan tried to catch her eye. "What were you up to out there, sweetheart?" Emily froze for a moment, then shrugged. "Just feeding the birds." "Are the birds out at night?" Megan asked lightly. Emily hesitated, her small hands twisting the hem of her sweater. "Sometimes," she said before darting toward her room. Megan sighed, watching her daughter disappear down the hallway. Something wasn't adding up. Over the next few days, Megan's curiosity turned into quiet concern. Emily's trips to the backyard continued, and her secrecy only deepened. Megan noticed little details that she couldn't ignore: crumbs on Emily's jacket, dirt on her hands, the way she glanced nervously toward the bushes whenever Megan was outside. On the third night, Megan decided to investigate. After Emily had gone to bed, Megan grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the cool evening air. The backyard felt eerily quiet, the kind of silence that made Megan's skin prickle. She approached the bushes, shining her light across the ground. At first, all she saw was the flattened grass where Emily had been sitting. But then she noticed something else, a small, hollowed-out space beneath the bushes, as if something had been sleeping there. Megan crouched down, running her fingers over the soft indentations in the dirt. Her flashlight caught a faint glimmer, a scattering of crumbs and what looked like tiny claw marks etched into the ground. Her heart quickened. She glanced back toward the house, her mind racing. What was Emily hiding? As Megan stood up, Max let out a sharp bark from inside the house, startling her. She turned off the flashlight and hurried back inside, determined to talk to her daughter in the morning. But as she lay in bed that night, listening to the faint creak of the backyard gate swinging in the wind, Megan couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't prepared for what she might find. Megan woke the next morning with a sense of determination. Something was going on in their backyard, and Emily knew more than she was letting on. Megan decided to approach her gently, hoping to coax out the truth. "Emily," she said over breakfast, her tone light and conversational, "what's your favorite thing about the backyard?" Emily glanced up from her bowl of cereal, her big brown eyes wary. The birds," she said after a pause. "What kind of birds do you see?" Megan pressed, keeping her voice casual. "Just regular ones," Emily said quickly, shifting in her seat. "Why are you asking?" "No reason," Megan replied, smiling. But she could see the tension in Emily's small shoulders, the way her fingers gripped the edge of the table. Her daughter was hiding something. That evening, Megan decided to observe more closely. After dinner, she stood by the window as Emily performed her now familiar routine, slipping into the kitchen, taking a slice of bread, and heading outside. This time, Megan followed, staying far enough behind to avoid being noticed. The air was cool, and the faint hum of crickets filled the quiet yard. She kept to the shadows, watching as Emily crouched near the bushes in her usual spot. At first, all Megan could hear was the rustle of leaves and Emily's soft murmurs. She strained to catch the words but could only make out fragments. "It's okay. I'll bring more tomorrow. You're safe." Megan's curiosity burned, but before she could step closer, Max barked sharply from inside the house. The sound startled Emily, who turned her head toward the house, her movements quick and defensive. Megan ducked back into the shadows, her heart pounding. After a moment, Emily relaxed and turned back to the bushes. Megan waited, holding her breath, as her daughter lingered a few minutes longer before standing up and brushing off her hands. When Emily returned to the house, Megan slipped in behind her, careful to stay out of sight. She was no closer to understanding what Emily was doing, but the little she had seen only deepened the mystery. That night, Megan shared her observations with Tom. "She's talking to something," Megan said, pacing the living room. "Not just feeding birds, there's something out there she's protecting." Tom looked skeptical. "What could it be? A rabbit? A stray cat?" "Maybe," Megan admitted, though the paw prints she'd seen near the bushes suggested something else. "But if it's a wild animal, it could be dangerous. I don't want her getting hurt." Tom nodded, his expression softening. "Maybe it's time we talk to her directly. She's a good kid, she'll tell us if we ask." Megan wasn't so sure. Emily's secretive behavior suggested she wouldn't give up her mystery easily. The next evening, Megan decided to take a different approach. Instead of waiting until Emily was asleep, she confronted her as soon as she returned from the backyard. "Emily," Megan said, her voice steady but kind, "can we talk for a second?" Emily froze in the hallway, her hands tucked behind her back. "About what?" "About the backyard," Megan said, kneeling to her daughter's eye level. "I've noticed you've been spending a lot of time out there. Is there something you want to tell me?" Emily's gaze darted to the floor. "No," she said softly. Megan reached out and gently touched her arm. "Sweetheart, you don't have to keep secrets. If there's something out there, I just want to make sure it's safe." Emily hesitated, her lip trembling. For a moment, Megan thought she might finally confess. But then Emily shook her head, pulling away. "There's nothing," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm just feeding the birds." With that, she bolted toward her room, leaving Megan kneeling in the hallway, her heart sinking. That night, Megan lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Something was wrong. Emily wasn't just feeding birds, Megan was certain of it now. But what could be so important that her daughter would go to such lengths to keep it a secret? As the house settled into silence, Megan made a decision. Tomorrow, she wouldn't just observe. She would follow Emily closely and confront whatever was hiding in their backyard. She drifted into a restless sleep, her mind swirling with possibilities, none of which prepared her for what she would find. The next evening arrived with a heavy air of anticipation. Megan had made up her mind. Tonight, she would follow Emily into the backyard and uncover what her daughter had been keeping hidden. As usual, Emily took a slice of bread and slipped outside just after sunset. Megan grabbed a jacket and waited a few moments before quietly stepping onto the porch. She kept her distance, careful not to crunch the gravel beneath her feet as she moved. Emily's small figure darted across the lawn, heading toward the overgrown bushes in the far corner of the yard. She crouched low, disappearing into the shadows, just as Megan had seen her do so many times before. Megan crept closer, her heart pounding with a mix of nervousness and curiosity. She could hear Emily's soft murmurs, her words barely audible over the chirping of crickets. "It's okay. I'm here," Emily whispered. "I brought you more food. You're going to feel better soon, I promise." Megan's breath hitched. Who, or what, was Emily talking to? She stepped closer, her footsteps light but steady. And then she saw it. Curled beneath the bushes, nestled in a small hollow Emily had created with leaves and an old towel, was a puppy. Its fur was matted with dirt, and its right hind leg was swollen and twisted at an unnatural angle. The little creature looked up at Emily with wide, frightened eyes, its tail giving a weak wag as she offered it the slice of bread. Megan froze, the sight hitting her like a wave. The pieces fell into place, the bread, the secrecy, the paw prints. Emily had been caring for this tiny, injured animal all along. "Emily," Megan said softly, stepping out of the shadows. Emily jumped, spinning around to face her mother. Her face was pale, and her hands clutched the bread tightly. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling. Megan knelt beside her daughter, her gaze shifting between Emily and the puppy. "You found him, didn't you?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. "He was crying, Mom. I heard him in the bushes a few days ago. He was so scared, and his leg was hurt. I didn't know what to do." Megan felt a swell of emotions, pride in Emily's compassion, guilt for not noticing sooner, and worry for the fragile little creature lying before them. She reached out, letting the puppy sniff her hand. It flinched at first, but when Megan gently stroked its head, it relaxed slightly, its tiny body trembling. "You've been taking care of him all by yourself?" Megan asked, her voice soft. Emily nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I didn't think you'd let me keep him. I just wanted to make him better." Megan sighed, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's face. "Sweetheart, I wish you'd told me. Taking care of an injured animal is a big responsibility, and he needs more help than you can give him alone." Emily's lip quivered. "You're not mad?" Megan smiled faintly, wrapping an arm around her daughter. "I'm not mad. I'm proud of you for wanting to help him. But we need to do this the right way. Let's get him inside, and we'll figure out how to help him together." Emily's face lit up with relief. "Really? We can help him?" Megan nodded. "Really. But you have to promise me something, no more secrets, okay? If you ever find something like this again, you come to me right away." Emily nodded quickly, her tears drying as she carefully picked up the puppy, cradling it against her chest. The little dog whimpered softly, its tail wagging just slightly as it nestled into her arms. Max, who had been watching silently from the porch, let out a single bark as Megan and Emily approached the house. He sniffed the puppy curiously, then gave a small wag of his tail, as if approving of the new addition. Once inside, Megan laid an old blanket on the kitchen floor and gently set the puppy down. Emily knelt beside it, stroking its fur as Megan examined its injured leg. "We'll need to call a vet first thing in the morning," Megan said, her voice steady despite the worry gnawing at her. "But for now, we'll make sure he's warm and comfortable." Emily nodded, her expression solemn. "Thank you, Mom." Megan smiled, ruffling her daughter's hair. "You did a good thing, Emily. You just needed a little help." As the puppy settled onto the blanket, its tiny body relaxing for the first time, Megan felt a quiet sense of relief. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. But as Megan looked at Emily, who sat protectively beside the injured animal, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much bigger journey. Megan and Emily stood in the living room, the weight of their discovery heavy in the air. Emily clutched the tiny puppy in her arms, bundled in an old towel, while Megan tried to prepare her husband, Tom, for what they were about to ask. "Tom," Megan said softly, her voice careful not to wake the injured pup. Tom looked up from the recliner where he was flipping through a magazine. His eyes immediately landed on the bundle in Emily's arms. "What is that?" Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling but determined. "It's a puppy, Daddy. He's hurt. I found him in the backyard, and I've been taking care of him." Tom sat up straighter, his expression shifting from surprise to concern. "You've been taking care of him? Megan, did you know about this?" Megan sighed, folding her arms. "I found out today. Emily has been sneaking out every night to feed him. He's in bad shape, Tom. He needs medical attention." Tom frowned, rubbing his temples. "Medical attention? Megan, do you know how much that could cost? And what about Max? What if this dog is sick or dangerous?" "He's not dangerous," Emily protested, clutching the puppy tighter. "He's just scared and hurt. He needs us." "Emily," Tom said, trying to soften his tone, "it's not that simple. Taking care of a dog, especially one that's this hurt, is a big responsibility. We already have Max, and Max is fine," Megan interrupted gently. "Look, Tom, I know it's a lot to ask, but just look at him." She gestured toward the puppy, whose tiny body was trembling even in sleep. "He's barely hanging on. If we don't help him, who will?" Tom glanced between his wife and daughter, his jaw tight with indecision. "And what happens after? We take him to the vet, and then what? We keep him? We're already stretched thin, Megan." Emily stepped closer, tears welling up in her wide eyes. "Please, Daddy. I'll take care of him. I'll do everything. He needs us, and I love him." Tom sighed, running a hand through his hair as he looked at the tiny creature in Emily's arms. The puppy let out a faint whimper, its frailty almost palpable. After a long pause, Tom relented. "Fine. We'll take him to the vet tomorrow. But no promises after that. Let's see what we're dealing with first." Emily's face lit up with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Daddy," she cried, rushing forward to hug him with her free arm. Tom chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I hope you know what you're getting us into, kiddo." Megan placed a hand on Tom's shoulder, her expression one of quiet thanks. "We'll figure it out," she said. The next morning, the family took the puppy to the small veterinary clinic in town. Dr. Carter, an older man with a kind demeanor, examined the puppy carefully, his face growing serious as he checked its injured leg. "He's got a fractured hind leg," Dr. Carter explained, pointing to the X-ray pinned to the light board. "It's not uncommon in puppies that have been hit by a car or dropped from a height. He's also severely malnourished, which has slowed his recovery." Emily stood close to the exam table, her eyes fixed on the little dog, who lay motionless except for the soft rise and fall of his chest. "Can you fix him?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Carter smiled gently. "He's young and resilient. With proper care, he has a good chance of recovering. But it'll take time, several weeks, maybe months, and it won't be easy." Megan glanced at Tom, whose expression was unreadable. She knew what he was thinking: time, money, energy. All things they were already stretched thin on. "How much care are we talking about?" Tom asked. "He'll need a cast for his leg, pain medication, and a steady diet to regain his strength, Dr. Carter replied. After that, it's about giving him a safe place to heal. But that means keeping him calm and closely monitored. Emily turned to her parents, her hands clenched at her sides. I'll do it. I'll take care of him. Please, don't let him die. Tom sighed deeply, rubbing his forehead. Megan could see the conflict in his face, the practical side of him warring with the father who didn't want to crush his daughter's spirit. Finally, he nodded. All right. We'll do what we can. But, Emily, this is your responsibility. You're going to have to step up. I will. I promise. Emily cried, throwing her arms around her father. Dr. Carter gave a warm smile. It sounds like this little guy is in good hands. As they prepared to leave, Megan couldn't help but glance at the puppy, who was now nestled in Emily's lap. She felt a strange sense of hope, as if this fragile creature had already started to bring something unexpected into their lives. The house felt different with the puppy's arrival. Though small and quiet, its presence seemed to ripple through the family, shifting routines and drawing attention. Emily was devoted from the start. She woke up early to check on him, sat with him after school, and even whispered to him at night, sharing secrets and promises of a better future. But not everything was smooth. The first vet visit had been the easy part. Now came the real challenge, keeping the fragile animal alive and helping him heal. Dr. Carter's instructions were straightforward but demanding. The puppy, now named Buddy by Emily, needed medication twice a day for his leg, regular feeding to regain his strength, and constant monitoring to ensure he stayed calm and didn't worsen his injuries. Emily took on her responsibilities with the fierce determination only a child could muster. She measured out his food carefully, wrapped him in soft blankets, and refused to leave his side for more than a few minutes at a time. Megan had to gently remind her to do her homework or join the family for meals. Max, their golden retriever, watched the new arrival with a mix of curiosity and caution. At first, he stayed away, his tail stiff and his ears perked. But as the days passed, he began inching closer, sniffing Buddy cautiously and wagging his tail when the puppy didn't react. "Do you think Max likes him?" Emily asked one evening as she stroked Buddy's head. Megan smiled. "I think he's trying to figure him out. Max has been the only dog here for a long time, it's a big change for him too." Emily nodded, her eyes full of hope. "I think they'll be best friends." One night, as Megan and Tom sat in the living room, the strain of Buddy's care started to show. "I don't want to be the bad guy here," Tom said, rubbing his temples, "but this is a lot, Megan. Between the vet bills and the time we're spending, I'm not sure we can keep this up long term." "I know," Megan replied, her voice soft. "But look at Emily. This isn't just about the puppy. She's grown so much in just a few days. She's responsible, compassionate. I don't want to take that away from her." Tom sighed. "I get that. But what happens if Buddy doesn't make it? He's still so weak." Neither of them had an answer. Emily overheard the conversation from her bedroom, where she lay on her bed with Buddy curled up beside her. Tears pricked her eyes, but she brushed them away. "You're going to get better," she whispered to the sleeping puppy. "I won't let them send you away. You're part of our family now." Her determination only grew. She began reading books about dog care and recovery, asking Dr. Carter questions whenever they visited the clinic. She even enlisted Sam, her older brother, to help. Though reluctant at first, Sam soon found himself sneaking Buddy scraps of food under the table and sitting with Emily as she tended to the puppy. Buddy's recovery was slow but steady. The swelling in his leg began to go down, and he started putting weight on it tentatively. His once dull eyes grew brighter, and his tail wagged more often. The first time Buddy barked, a tiny, hoarse yip, Emily laughed so hard she cried. "Mom! Dad!" "He barked," she exclaimed, running to find them. Megan and Tom exchanged a glance, both smiling despite themselves. "He's making progress," Megan said, squeezing Tom's hand. Tom nodded, though the worry hadn't entirely left his face. "Yeah, he is." One evening, as Emily sat in the backyard with Buddy and Max, Megan watched from the kitchen window. The sight of her daughter, who had once been so shy and reserved, laughing and playing with the two dogs, filled her with a quiet sense of pride. But she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. Buddy had come into their lives so suddenly, bringing joy and challenges in equal measure. What if something happened to him? She pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the warmth of the moment. As the days turned into weeks, Buddy became stronger, more playful, and increasingly a part of the family. Even Tom couldn't deny the little dog's impact. "Looks like you've got yourself a shadow," he joked one morning as Buddy followed Emily through the house. Emily beamed. "He's my best friend." Tom ruffled her hair, a small smile tugging at his lips. But none of them could have guessed how soon Buddy's loyalty and his growing bond with Emily would be tested in a way they'd never forget. Buddy had become more than just a small, injured guest in the Carter household. To Emily, he was a best friend, a confidant, and a reminder of her ability to make a difference. Every morning, she woke early to check on him, carrying his food and water carefully to the little bed they'd made for him in the kitchen. Buddy's leg, still encased in a cast, made him a bit wobbly, but he was determined. His small tail wagged fiercely whenever Emily approached, and he followed her with bright, eager eyes. "You're doing so good, Buddy," Emily whispered one afternoon as she helped him take a few careful steps across the yard. "Soon, you'll be running just like Max." Max, who had initially been wary of Buddy, had warmed up considerably. He now lay nearby as Emily played with the puppy, keeping a watchful eye on both of them. Occasionally, he'd nudge Buddy gently with his nose, a gesture Emily called dog hugs. "See," she said, laughing as Buddy barked in response to Max, "I told you he'd be your friend." At dinner that evening, Emily chattered excitedly about Buddy's progress. "He walked all the way across the yard today," she exclaimed. "His leg is getting so much better." Megan smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Dr. Carter will be happy to hear that." Tom nodded, though his expression remained cautious. "Just make sure you don't push him too hard. He's still recovering." "I won't," Emily promised. Sam rolled his eyes, but couldn't suppress a grin. "You talk about that dog like he's your baby or something." Emily stuck out her tongue at her brother, but she couldn't help smiling. "He's not my baby. He's my buddy." As the weeks passed, Buddy's presence began to shift the dynamic of the household. Sam, who had initially shown little interest, started sneaking treats to Buddy when he thought no one was looking. Megan caught him once, crouched by Buddy's bed with a piece of leftover chicken. "Don't tell Emily," he whispered, grinning sheepishly. Megan laughed softly. "Your secret's safe with me." Even Tom, who had been the most hesitant about keeping Buddy, found himself warming to the little dog. One evening, as he worked on his laptop at the kitchen table, Buddy limped over and rested his head on Tom's foot. Tom froze for a moment, then reached down to scratch behind Buddy's ears. "All right, little guy," he murmured. "I guess you're not so bad." Buddy's growing strength and confidence mirrored the changes in Emily. Once shy and reserved, she now exuded a quiet determination. Megan watched as her daughter took charge of Buddy's care with an attention to detail that rivaled an adult's. "You've grown up so much," Megan said one night as she tucked Emily into bed. Emily looked up at her mother, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "I mean how responsible you've been with Buddy," Megan explained. "You've worked so hard to take care of him. I'm really proud of you." Emily smiled sleepily, her hand resting on Buddy, who lay curled up at her side. "He makes it easy. He's the best dog ever." Megan kissed her forehead. "Good night, sweetheart." "Good night, Mom," Emily murmured, her eyes closing as she drifted off. One rainy evening, Emily decided to sit by the window with Buddy, watching the droplets streak across the glass. She wrapped her arms around him, her voice quiet as she spoke. "You know, when I found you, I was scared," she admitted. I didn't know if you'd be okay. But you are so brave. You make me want to be brave too. Buddy licked her hand, his eyes warm and trusting. Max patted over, lying beside them with a soft sigh. Emily rested her head against his side, her two best friends close by. But despite the peaceful moments, life was unpredictable, and Megan couldn't shake her unease. Something about the way Buddy had come into their lives felt both serendipitous and fragile. As she watched Emily's bond with him grow stronger, Megan found herself hoping, praying, that nothing would disrupt the harmony they had found. Unbeknownst to her, the Carter family's greatest test was just around the corner. And Buddy, the once fragile puppy who had fought so hard to heal, would soon prove just how much he belonged. The evening started like any other. The Carter family had just finished dinner, and Emily was outside in the backyard with Buddy and Max. The sun had set, leaving the yard bathed in the cool glow of the porch light. Emily sat cross-legged on the grass, tossing a small ball for Buddy to limp after, his tail wagging furiously. Max lounged nearby, his head resting on his paws. Inside, Megan was cleaning up the kitchen while Tom worked on his laptop in the living room. The baby was asleep upstairs, and Sam was engrossed in a game on his tablet. It was one of those quiet, ordinary nights that no one ever expects to take a dramatic turn. But then it happened. Megan had just put away the last of the dishes when the smell of smoke tickled her nose. She froze, her eyes darting toward the stove. Everything was off. She frowned and turned toward the hallway, sniffing the air again. The faint scent of burning wood was unmistakable. "Tom," she called, her voice sharp with concern. Tom looked up from his laptop, confused. "What is it?" "I smell smoke," Megan said, hurrying toward the stairs. Tom stood and followed her, sniffing the air as well. His expression darkened. "It's coming from upstairs." Panic set in. Megan bolted up the stairs, calling for Sam and the baby. She reached the hallway and froze in horror as she saw smoke seeping from under the door to the baby's room. "Tom!" "The baby!" she screamed. Outside, Emily was laughing as Buddy brought the ball back to her for the third time. But her laughter stopped abruptly when Max leapt to his feet, barking loudly, his body rigid with alertness. "Max?" Emily said, standing up. Buddy joined in, his high-pitched barks mixing with Max's deeper ones. Then Emily saw it, the faint glow of flickering orange light coming from the second-story window. Her heart dropped. "Mom? Dad?" she yelled, running toward the back door. Inside, chaos erupted. Megan grabbed the baby from his crib, coughing as the thick smoke filled the room. Tom appeared behind her, his face pale. "We have to get out now," he shouted. Sam ran out of his room, his eyes wide with fear. "What's happening?" "Just get outside," Tom ordered, herding him toward the stairs. As the family scrambled toward the front door, Megan froze. "Where's Emily?" Tom's face fell. "She's outside." She was with the dogs. But Emily wasn't outside anymore. Emily had run into the house, panicked by the sight of smoke and the sounds of shouting. The living room was hazy, the air acrid and stifling. She stopped at the base of the stairs, calling out for her family. "Mom! Dad!" Tom turned, his face a mixture of relief and terror. "Emily! You're supposed to stay outside." "I wanted to help," Emily cried. Before Tom could reach her, the ceiling above the staircase groaned ominously. A shower of sparks fell, and a flaming beam collapsed, blocking the stairs. "Emily!" Megan screamed, clutching the baby tightly. Emily stumbled back, coughing as smoke filled her lungs. She tried to move toward the front door, but the fire was spreading too fast. She froze, her small body trembling. Outside, Max and Buddy were barking incessantly at the door. Buddy, sensing the danger, limped toward the house, his instincts pushing him forward. Inside, Emily sank to the floor, tears streaming down her face. Then she heard it, the faint sound of barking cutting through the crackling flames. "Buddy," she whispered hoarsely. The small puppy appeared at the edge of the living room, his tiny figure silhouetted by the glow of the fire. He barked furiously, his eyes fixed on Emily. He ran toward her, his limp barely slowing him down, and grabbed the hem of her shirt with his teeth. Emily gasped. "You came for me?" Buddy tugged insistently, pulling her toward the back of the house where the kitchen door was still clear. Emily stumbled after him, coughing as the smoke thickened around them. In the backyard, Max barked at the door, pacing anxiously. Buddy reached it first, scratching and barking to alert the family outside. Tom appeared moments later, smashing the glass with a chair. He reached through the jagged frame and pulled Emily into his arms, holding her tightly as he carried her to safety. "Thank God," Megan sobbed, running to them. Tom turned to the broken door. "Buddy." The little puppy was limping behind them, but as he reached the threshold, a small explosion from the kitchen sent debris flying. Buddy yelped and collapsed just outside the door. Megan rushed forward, scooping the puppy into her arms. His tiny body was trembling, and his fur was singed, but his eyes opened weakly as he let out a faint whimper. "You're okay," Megan whispered, her voice shaking. "You're going to be okay." Emily knelt beside them, her tears falling freely. "You saved me, Buddy. You're my hero." Tom wrapped his arms around his family, his expression grim but filled with relief. As the sound of sirens grew closer, Megan held Buddy tightly, silently vowing to do whatever it took to save the little dog who had saved them all. The Carter family sat in the waiting room of the veterinary clinic, the sterile smell of disinfectant heavy in the air. Emily clutched Buddy's leash tightly in her hands, her eyes fixed on the door that led to the exam rooms. Megan sat beside her, an arm wrapped around her shoulders, while Tom paced the small room. Even Sam had come along, leaning silently against the wall with Max at his feet. It had been a long night. The fire department had extinguished the flames quickly, but the damage to the house was significant. They'd all escaped unharmed, thanks to Buddy, but the little dog hadn't come through unscathed. Dr. Carter finally emerged, his face calm but serious. Emily jumped to her feet, searching his expression for answers. "Buddy inhaled a lot of smoke, and he has some burns on his paws and side," Dr. Carter explained. "But he's stable. He's a tough little guy." Emily let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Can I see him?" Dr. Carter nodded. "He's sedated right now, but you can sit with him while he rests." The family crowded into the small room where Buddy lay on a soft bed, his tiny body covered in bandages. Emily knelt beside him, her fingers gently brushing his head. "Hey, Buddy," she whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. "You're so brave. You saved me." "Thank you." Buddy's eyes fluttered open for a moment, his tail giving a faint wag. It was enough to send a fresh wave of relief through Emily's chest. Tom cleared his throat, his voice unusually soft. "He's a hero, Emily. He saved all of us." Megan nodded, wiping away tears. "We owe him so much." Emily looked up at her parents, her voice steady despite her tears. "Can we keep him? Please?" "He's already part of the family." Tom and Megan exchanged a look. It was a silent conversation, one that passed in an instant but carried all the weight of the past weeks. Tom finally sighed and nodded. "He's ours," he said. "For good." Emily threw her arms around him. "Thank you, Daddy." "Thank you." Even Sam, who usually rolled his eyes at his sister's enthusiasm, smiled as he watched the scene unfold. The days that followed were a blur of repairs, adjustments, and settling into a temporary rental while the house was restored. But through it all, Buddy remained the heart of the family. Max, who had been a protector and mentor to Buddy in his own way, seemed to sense the puppy's newfound status. The two dogs became inseparable, with Max often standing watch as Buddy recovered. Emily took her role as Buddy's caretaker more seriously than ever, helping him with his exercises and making sure he got his medication on time. "You're going to be running around with Max in no time," she told him one morning as he struggled to walk across the yard. Buddy barked in agreement, his tail wagging with determination. Months later, the family finally moved back into their repaired home. The smell of fresh paint filled the air, and the walls were brighter, but the spirit of the house was the same. One sunny afternoon, Emily sat in the backyard with Buddy and Max. Buddy, now fully healed, raced across the grass, his once wobbly legs carrying him with speed and confidence. Max followed close behind, barking playfully. Megan watched from the porch, a cup of tea in her hands. Tom joined her, leaning against the railing. "Look at them," Megan said, her voice filled with pride. Tom nodded, his gaze softening. "We've been through a lot, but I think we're stronger because of it. That little guy, he really changed everything." Megan smiled. "He did." Emily laughed as Buddy leapt into her arms, licking her face with unrestrained joy. "You're the best dog in the world," she told him. "And you're my hero." Buddy barked as if in agreement, his tail wagging furiously. For the Carter family, life wasn't perfect, there were still challenges to face, as there always would be. But in their hearts, they knew they could handle anything, because they had each other, and because a tiny, brave puppy had taught them the true meaning of courage, love, and family.